Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Tennille Murray, and I'm the Community Engagement Director here at AJA. It is wonderful to see so many of you back online after the Chagim, and we hope you and your family had a beautiful Chag, spending it together, celebrating our Judaism and our New Year. Tonight, as always, we have a fantastic guest, and we are very excited to welcome Michael Scott CSC, the founder of the 2023 Foundation. Our topic tonight is Israel and the values worth defending. Michael brings a wealth of experience from his distinguished military career and his ongoing work confronting anti-Semitism and championing Western values. He'll be sharing his insights on Israel, the rise of global threats, and the importance of individual agency in standing up for what's right. I'll remind everybody if you have any questions for Michael, please use the raise hand button and we'll get to a Q&A after the presentation. This is also being recorded, will be available on YouTube, and will be playing on J-Air tomorrow. We're also going to dive a little bit into Michael's up-and-coming book, but I'll let Michael tell you more about that, and we'll get more into that in the presentation. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, Michael, and we wish everybody a wonderful evening. Thank you, Michael.
Hey, thank you very much to Neil and Dr. Rob Gregory, ladies and gentlemen of the Australian Jewish Association. It's my great privilege and honour to be dialing in today from the studio of my dear friend Daniel Lukowitz in Sydney. I'll be flapping my gums for about 30 minutes to explain a little bit about my background, to then really get into the heart of the discussion, which I believe is the question and answer. Can you see, Tennille, can the team see the presentation, the slides on their screen?
We certainly can.
Fantastic. And so I'm not only the founder of a harm minimisation charity to combat anti-Semitism, I'm the author of a recently released book, A Light Still Burns, Israel and the Values Worth Defending. To many in the audience, self-evident that they're one and the same, but we really struggle, I think, to communicate to some people as potential allies the truth and the stakes. And so, if you'd be interested in learning a little bit more about my book, there's a QR code on the screen. Okay, slide two. And if David and Ailey, my friends, are dialing in, and you recognise the drapes, yes, that's at a place that you know very well with my dear friend Richard Kemp last year and my wife Tresina. Over the next few minutes, we'll be talking to origins, what I believe is the strategic problem. And as Einstein suggests, we ought to take 55 minutes to frame and understand the problem before 5 minutes allocated to solving it. I'll speak a little bit about my foundation to combat anti-Semitism. I'll talk to my book, A Light Still Burns, Israel and the Values Worth Defending, and leave about 30 minutes for question and answer at the back. One thing I will flag is that the way anti-Semites choose to attack me is threatening my soon-to-be former relationship with the Australian Defence Force. I've been a soldier since I was 17. One of the things in the military that they do incredibly well is support the transition from first career to what follows. But like a lot of you are being attacked just for standing up and for being who you are, that's similar to what I'm facing as well. And so I just stress that what I'm talking about today is on behalf of me and not the government or my soon-to-be former employer, the Australian Defence Force. Okay, who is this guy? What is my connection to Israel? Why is your thing my thing? I joined the Australian Army at 17. I've served in East Timor, Bougainville, Iraq, 2 tours of Afghanistan. That picture at the top left is when I was a combat team commander in southern Afghanistan in 2011, where I was responsible for lawfully, ethically and morally applying lethal force consistent with the expectations of a democracy in a complex battle space, moving around clockwise. For over 2 years, I served as the head of military in a UN peacekeeping mission, headquartered in Jerusalem, responsible for 153 officers drawn from 27 different troop contributing countries, including from an Australian perspective, non-traditional partners like the Russian Federation, China, the US was there, and 22 other nations, including Australia. We operated in Israel, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, and in Egypt, strategically significant part of the world, at a very interesting period in time. I was there from July 2019 through to September 2021, living just near the President's compound in Kiryat Shemel in Jerusalem. Um, Looks like we've got a bit of a technical problem here. Tennille, can you still hear me?
Yes, we hear you clearly.
Fantastic. I'll keep going. I've just lost my screen here. On the bottom line, that's a picture of my wife and I in the King David Hotel just before COVID, and moving from left to right along the bottom. Some of you would recognise the Anzac Monument, which is about 2 kilometres to the west of the beautiful kibbutz in Be'eri. I'm Royal Australian Armoured Corps, and so the work of General Sir Harry Chauvel with the Light Horse in the Sinai and Palestine campaigns is LORE, law to me. Moving further across.
I am 16, going on 17. I know that I'm naive.
Can someone? It sounds like there might be a bit of corruption there.
You're on it.
I can see in the chat there's a message here. It says, hard to hear. Could it be a bit louder, please?
Okay, we still got some technical difficulties in the studio,
Okay,
but
that's actually better with the audio.
I'll keep going on. My then 18-year-old daughter, Georgina, was at a music concert in Western Sydney the evening of Saturday, October 7, 2023. So at the same time I was hearing from my friends what was happening in the south of Israel, my daughter was at a music concert. And to say that I can empathise and relate with what happened at those kids at Ra'im is an understatement. But coming back to my time in the Middle East from July 2019 to September 2021, that picture is the area of operations and some of the disposition of the mission that I was assigned to. The UN Truth Supervision Organisation is the longest UN peacekeeping mission, observing and monitoring and reporting the terms of the ceasefire agreement. Between the various countries in Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Our disposition from headquartered in Jerusalem, we had a team of unarmed observers operating in southern Lebanon between the Litani River and the Blue Line, from the Mediterranean across to the Mount Hermon complex. I had team members up in Beirut. Coming around to Syria, I had team members in Damascus, operating either side of the area of separation, some headquartered in Tiberias and operating on the A side, so in the Golan, and the B side we had people in Quneitra that operated in southwestern Syria. Coming around to Jordan, we had a liaison office that would attend from Jerusalem across to Jordan. Had team members operating down on the Suez Canal in a place called Ismailia, and about halfway through my deployment, that liaison office moved into Cairo. And so, of course, you can't command from behind a keyboard. I spent time moving between the various countries, not only working with my team members, but flanking call signs such as the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon and the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force operating in Syria. Okay, this is a picture taken from southwestern Lebanon, looking south into the Hula Valley and the beautiful town of Metula. This was approximately March 2021. And one thing I draw to people's attention is that if we think of the level of security that is around many of our shuls in Australia, that technical fence separating southern Lebanon with northern Israel, it is very easy to to be breached, and that gives a level of understanding as to why the IDF was so concerned with RAD-1 forces after October 7. That was all that was separating Hezbollah with the towns in northern Israel. Okay, next slide. This is up in Beirut, and those pictures on the right and at the bottom of the screen, if you think that, wow, that doesn't look too dissimilar to Bondi Mall or somewhere in one of the better suburbs in Melbourne, that's absolutely the case. But it's the Verdun Mall in Beirut. There's a geotag to identify the placement, and Lebanon could be the Paris of the Middle East, but for the tentacles of Hezbollah that unfortunately are still decisive in that beautiful country. Flashing across now to images in Damascus. Now on the right of the screen, if people think that, wow, that doesn't look too dissimilar from Yehudi Mall in Jerusalem, that's absolutely the case, and that was my experience as well. But that's actually the Grand Souk of Damascus, and a courtyard in central Damascus at a time where Islamic State was posing a significant concern. The freedom of movement in central Damascus was permissive, and from someone that served in Iraq and Afghanistan, that was a bit of a surprise for me. I wasn't expecting seeing in Damascus what I did at that period of time. Of course, since Assad regime has fallen and HTS are coming through, the situation has changed, and someone like me, indeed peacekeepers, as I understand it, it's non-permissive to operate in Damascus at the moment. Okay, fast forward to September 2024. I was a guest back in Israel as part of a military expert panel out of the United Kingdom. Top left was a great honour of meeting not only the Prime Minister of Israel, but a few of his key people, including the former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. As part of that engagement, the team comprising Natasha Hausdorff, Richard Kemp, Andrew Fox, and a number of other VIPs in the veterans community, we entered Gaza with the IDF through the Kerem Shalom crossing all the way down the Philadelphia corridor, which separates Egyptian Rafah from the Gaza envelope. And indeed, these pictures you see here, on the left, that is me standing in the aperture of a tunnel that was big enough to drive trucks through from Egyptian Rafah into Gaza. The aperture came out at a mosque. Bottom right is a picture of Andrew Fox, who works for the Henry Jackson Society, is quite an extraordinary strategic resource globally, a veteran of the UK military, not Jewish, but is writing truth to power on a number of things, such as a really effective presentation debunking Hamas Ministry of Health statistics, human casualties, etc. And of course, the erstwhile Natasha Hausdorff is in that picture, taken at Ra'im. Okay, fast forwarding out of my experience, my connection to Israel, I've been a Zionist since my early 20s, when a mentor of mine suggested I read about Israel's wars, and so understanding the history, the politics, the peace attempts also exposed me to the tactics, the operations, and the strategy. But my connection to Israel was really firmed after what we saw on the 9th of October 2023, Gas the Jews, F the Jews. But zipping forward almost 2 years, our strategic problem is that to many of our fellow citizens, what we saw on the bridge in early August is seen as upstanding behaviour. So few non-Jews have first-hand experience with Israel, to the extent that they don't understand the truth, they don't understand the stakes, and they're gaslighted into thinking there's a genocide, a famine, and apartheid in the Jewish state. That's not only what I understand to be the problem, but is also the opportunity, getting reasonable, open-minded non-Jews with little or no first-hand experience to Israel to see and interact with the environment, to learn the truth themselves. It's my judgment that this is not only a global problem, but it's worsening. I can't point to a single precedent in the history of our species with some of the challenges that we saw in the 1930s, and we're seeing recurring now, self-resolve. And I think engagements like this tonight, and the fact that David Adler before Rob Gregory and the team have done so effectively, bringing people together and advocating. Thank you one and all for the agency that you're exercising. Okay, the inescapable context, and if you look at the date assigned to this quote by Jonathan Swift, 1710, lies will always be out in front, but in my judgment, truth is more powerful when perfectly personally experienced. And so the solution, put simply, is that non-Jews will become allies, as I define it, Zionists, people that believe in the political and cultural self-determination of the indigenous people in their ancient and ancestral homeland, when they understand the truth and they understand the stakes. Not enough non-Jews come across to Israel. Part of my duty and my legacy is to establish a coherent strategic pipeline to change that, not competing with the wonderful work that the AJA and other Jewish groups and Christian Zionist groups do. In my judgment, that is the wheel. I'm simply looking at bringing what works to people that others can't reach. And so UD people are part of a majority in my estimation. I say again, a majority. There's nowhere near 0.2% of the world's non-Jews that have ever heard of Natan Sharansky, let alone appreciating that Sharansky is right. We cannot combat anti-Semitism separate to a defence of the Jewish state. And as someone that grew up outside an echo chamber, as a non-Jewish, secular, apolitical, veteran but unapologetic Zionist, people won't defend Israel until they know Israel. People cannot know Israel unless they travel and experience it for themselves. And so that's the opportunity, incentivising ways of getting people across to Israel, study opportunities in Israel from August next year, Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, Reichman and the Technion, employment opportunities in Israel, high-tech sector, medical sector, education sector, broadly teachers working in Israel in international schools, speaking in English to diplomats' kids, and then experiences. And one of the ways that I'm reaching veterans, not only in Australia, but other Western countries, is major battlefield experiences, important days in Australian and other military history, such as Anzac Day, 25th of April, or 31st of October, Beersheba Day. Okay, so the basis of my foundation, the 2023 foundation, on the left is Senator J. William Fulbright, who established in 1946 the Fulbright Scholarship. And fast forward 80 years, it's bringing 8,000 people from all over the world into the US, not only to educate people, but build cross-cultural linkages. And so I've modelled my foundation not only on that, but the work of the Colombo Plan that was so successful in Australia after the Second World War, bringing people to Australia from Ceylon all the way across to Thailand in the region and tying countries through people together. I'm modelling the foundation on something that works. The vision of the foundation is a Western world where Jews don't live in fear, because of course we know that what starts with targeting of the Jewish community, a productive minority not only in Australia but other Western countries, it doesn't end there. Jewish values are Israeli values, are Western values, are Australian values. Too few people understand the truth, and I will change that. The mission is tomorrow's non-Jewish upstanders through experience, with the goal 70 influencers in the first 12 months, 750 in the first 5 years, and then scaling up to 8,000 per annum by year 10. Now, that's not an Australian charity. I am building an Israel-centric charity that I'll prove the concept in Australia, then scale and expand to other Western nations. Some of those on the dialed in today that know me personally and my story, I spent the first 4 months of this year finishing a Masters of Business Admin, my third master's degree in New York at Stern School of Business. As part of my time over there, not only did I write and then subsequently publish a book, I'd also socialise myself to some APAC donors, JNF and Stand With Us. And so some of the connections I've already established in the Jewish and non-Jewish community is global reach. I spent some time in New Zealand speaking to VIPs during Lamud earlier in the year. They're very interested in a 2023 foundation placement in New Zealand, as are friends of mine in other Western countries. But of course, I'm not looking at advancing on multiple fronts at a different point in time. There's no one such as a soldier that understands pragmatism, that we need to be strategic and coherent and patient in our approach. And so going back to October 2023, my personal timeline was 6 months of thinking through and planning and designing what would actually meet the mark and build a strategic legacy. Last 14 months explaining who I am, what my vision is, and I'm now in a position that I'm seeking funds to deliver on the vision of the foundation. Now, I'm not a travel guide. In my analysis of the challenge, I'm taking a strategic approach of influence. It doesn't start when people clear customs, and it doesn't end when people get back. Step one is the referral and the preparation. And indeed, those that are dialing in, I'd put you in the category of trusted agents, people that understand the truth and understand the stakes. And one of the questions I'd put is that of all of your non-Jewish friends, who in your judgment are the top two that we may be able to work collegially together to build up standards out of those silent majority. Once I identify, once I've had an interaction with them and the referring individual, begins the preparation where I would look at the experience that might benefit an individual, and say someone in their mid-20s that might have completed an undergrad degree and be in the workforce, they may benefit from a scholarship placement to do a Masters of Business Admin in Kohler Advanced School of Management as part of Tel Aviv University. Or if someone aspires to be a future founder or a C-suite executive in a multinational company based in Manhattan, then a vocational placement in Israel for a couple of years in AI or some of the IT suites may benefit the individual. The formula will work where we identify all rising like boats on the tide, not a zero-sum game where it costs an individual to attend Israel based on an experience. And I'm looking at those win-win methodologies. And after that, there's a continuing interaction and engagement in order to develop people into the upstanders of tomorrow. And looking at what that may actually mean, go backwards to give an indication as to what we may see going forward. In the 1950s, a young Bob Hawke, where he was applying for a Rhodes Scholarship to study in Oxford, in future, not Oxford, but Israel. And indeed, some of the measures of effectiveness and performance that I'm looking at is that giving people an experience early on, an understanding so that they can empathise and relate with the Jewish state. I believe that when they come out of Israel back into Western countries, Australia is a case in point, they may experience something similar to what I did, which is, my goodness, I never realised that the temperature has risen slowly in Australia. I feel like the proverbial slow-boiled frog. While I was in the pond, I didn't notice the changes, but it was only after I spent time in a frontier democracy on the bleeding edge of our civilization, that is the state of Israel in the Middle East, that when people come back in and think, look, how the ABC is representing Israel is so different from my lived personal experience. Houston, we've got a problem. And indeed, if we think objectively through a thought experiment where we said everything we know of the Jewish state, and we think that all of our experiences were to come from, say, what we heard on the ABC, we can sort of understand the inversion where otherwise sensible and educated and decent people are absolutely convinced that 2 + 2 = 5. Okay, that comes to my book, and I think I've got about 5 minutes more. A Light Still Burns, Israel and the Values Worth Defending is a book that I wrote earlier in the year while I was across in America. It's a series of short essays that provide some insights and some background to help people go from, preschool level up. Unfortunately, one of the challenges in my view is that when people, non-Jews, hear Tel Aviv, a model of Mogadishu, a mental model of Mogadishu, Somalia, or Soweto comes to mind. They can't understand that Tel Aviv is so similar to Sydney or Melbourne, where Jewish people are just like Australians. They want to crack on, they want to raise a family, they're not interested in litigating an endless conflict, and it's only getting people across there to interact with the environment that we can start overcoming Orwellian levels of gaslighting and projection. And that curve that I've got on the screen there, that's my attempt to find something in a different context. This is the technical adaptation curve, and if I apply that to the bell curve of Australian or indeed Western society, the laggards in this example are those open anti-Semites shouting "river to the sea" and "globalise the Intifada." Please don't start there, because in my judgment we cannot attempt to reason with unreasonable people. It's better to look at the other side of the curve, where we're innovators or early adopters, if you will. And so we're in the process of having those quiet conversations to fast followers to help ripple that out and to understand that threats to Israel and threats to the global Jewish diaspora are actually threats to not only my family and business interests, but wider people within the West. Rob, I've still got a bit of a technical problem here with my screen, so I'm not actually tracking exactly where we're at in the time, but I think that's quite a reasonable time to break my monologue and now hand back to you and to Neil to look at a question and answer. But before I do, the QR code is on the screen again. Do please have a look at that book. You're not the target audience. You know a lot of the topic. This is written as a tool that you can read into, but then provide to some of your non-Jewish friends that may be interested to learn a bit more about the topic. But one of the things that I would put to people as we're in the business of influencing, we've got to be patient and we've got to be strategic. And I believe a good way of looking at the challenge but the opportunity is one of eating a tub of Vegemite or encouraging a friend to eat a tub of Vegemite. If we spread it on one bit of toast too thick, we may encourage our friend to take one bite. There'll never be a second bite. And so what we need to do is understand and appreciate that our enemies have been growing like bacteria in the shadows for decades. I've read some accounts that the problems that have become readily apparent since October 7, with the coming together of hard left zealots, intersectionalists, traditional Islamists, anarchists and anti-Semites, have been growing for many decades. So I believe that we need to take a deep breath and look at the first couple of people to influence, start there and scale and expand. But enough of me, back to you, Tanil.
Thank you so much, Michael. But before we kick off our Q&A, maybe if you just want to stop sharing your screen and we'll kick off that Q&A section. I will pop a link to Michael's book in our chat, and I will follow up as well on our recording. We'll put that link as well to purchase the book. We'll start off our Q&A with our CEO, Robert Gregory.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Michael, for all that you do, for your friendship of AJA and for your support of the Jewish community and the amazing work you're doing. And I'm sure a lot of people here will purchase your book. We'll definitely also share it in our newsletter. And I just wanted to ask you to maybe speak a little bit more about the military links. So what people in the ADF think about Israel and the IDF, and have you had anything to do with the IDF? Do they reach out? Is there any interesting cooperation from that angle? Is the military to military ties good?
Yes, I'm speaking in a private capacity. One thing that separates people like me, that is long-serving senior officers in the Australian Army, from somewhere like Burma, is the Burmese officers meddle in politics. I don't. One of the things that genuinely shocked me is some of my friends, and indeed one mentor I can think of, someone that I've known for the best part of 30 years that I know has served in Iraq and Afghanistan, a combat officer, has fallen the wrong side of a binary light and darkness issue. And that caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting that. Those that follow me on social media have seen just in the last couple of days another veteran buddy of mine, someone I've known for 30 years, that openly attacks me. This particular individual's politics appears to have radicalised to the left in recent years, but stepping out of my interaction with the veterans community in Australia and overseas, I can look people in the eye and say that the IDF are the most lawful, ethical and moral military fighting force that world history has ever known. And indeed, when I'm speaking with non-Jews about what the average IDF person is and their values, I ask people to picture their own children and their own grandchildren, citizen soldiers that are not interested in wearing the cloth of their country and carrying a rifle, but those passionate individuals that understand the stakes, that there's monsters to their front and families to their back. And so Israel, in my judgment, has a wonderful story to tell, and part of my vision for the foundation is that I'll help it to be seen and heard by people that we cannot currently reach.
Thank you, Michael. Alan, would you like to unmute?
Yes, thank
Oh.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you, Michael. Can I just ask you a military question, because we've all got Gaza on our minds, and it seems to me that the one major factor that needs to change is that Hamas has to be disarmed, kicked out, or preferably both. Yet we've seen a bit of a resurgence of Hamas in the last week or so. So my question is, has the Trump peace plan given enough thought to filling the vacuum as Hamas is being degraded?
Can I thank you, Alan, and lovely to see you. I think we've crossed paths on a couple of events recently. In my judgment, what President Trump has achieved just in the last 10 days is really quite extraordinary. Live hostages back. There's still 13 murdered hostages in Gaza, including the adopted son of a dear friend of mine, an Israeli that I met a couple of years ago through Israeli triathlon. And so us feeling happy and sad at the same time is reasonable and understandable. Very relieved at the live hostages coming back, but understanding as it relates to hostages, there's still 13 in the envelope, and none of us are under any misunderstanding that we will be singing Kumbaya and peace will break out. In my judgment, Israel is about 70% through what historians in time will refer to as the 100 Years' War of Survival. And so I think that we will see action, reaction, counteraction cycles. But in terms of how the IDF have prosecuted things and the work with the Trump administration, it's perfectly rational to take an overwhelming challenge, that is the envelope that's 45 kilometres from the Philadelphia corridor up to Zekim, and divide an overwhelming, impossible problem into smaller bits. And as I understand it, there's about 50% of geography that's under IDF control, and a lesser amount that's still under Hamas control. I've written in my book as to, and this is about a year ago I wrote it, how I would resolve the problem, and I would break it into D, E and F zones. I'd look at family units. I'd speak to, parents and say, right, yes or no question, are you willing to live in peace with your Yehudi neighbours? If the answer is yes, bio-enroll mum and dad, their kids, probably their parents, a few generations, move them out from where they are now behind a barrier, so that the de-radicalisation program in the mosques and in the schools can begin. Tragically, our taxpayers' money has funded a level of radicalism that's without precedent precedent in the history of our species, more radicalised than the Hitler Youth or the Mongols, the Huns, the Vandals and the Tatars. And so that will take time to unwind and reprogram, I think, with Abraham Accords partners. And if we look at the UAE, the Ministry of Tolerance program that Emirati is running, I think points to a solution that can be achieved in Gaza. But I think that there has been some amazing successes, Alan, but there will be some setbacks. It's premature to toast peace at the moment. That is not besmirching what President Trump has achieved. I think all of us would be of the view that he is the one man on the planet that has been able to get the live hostages back and to get some movement. And it's also based on, in my view, the brave work of the Israeli Defence Forces over a protracted period that's led to the successes just in the last 2 weeks. Over.
Thank you, Michael. Ben, would you like to unmute? Sorry, Ben. Yeah, are you able to unmute, please?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me now?
Yes.
G'day, Ben. Loud and clear, mate.
Hey, hi, Michael. I've got so many questions. I'll pick two. The first one's probably going to be the hardest for you. When are you going to find time to join me for an ocean swim? The second one is, having led a UNIFIL group, what's your perspective on the apparent complete impotence and failure of UNIFIL as exposed in the recent war? Or maybe if you want to pick another question, the Fulbright and Rhodes scholarships have got enormous amounts of money behind them. How do you see sort of yourself meeting that challenge, and also perhaps whether there'll be a loss of momentum and interest after this war's over?
Yeah, I think I'll tackle the second one first, and then I'll come into the UNIFIL question. I was never a part of UNIFIL, but the UN Truth Supervision Organisation, UNIFIL, were a flanking call sign. I'm operating on a not-for-profit model where I'm seeking voluntary contributions. There's much larger analysis and a lot of conversations that are happening separately to date with prospective donors. But from drops come ripples, from ripples waves. There's a very small number that will allow me to prove the concept. And for those that have known me, I've been self-funding this effort for the majority of the time since October 2023. And so I take a very austere approach as someone that has served in my first career with taxpayers' dollars. I can look potential donors in the eye that every shekel that is provided is going to its intended purpose. But looking at the mandate of UNIFIL, UN Resolution 1701, that came about after the Second Lebanon War in about 2006. If we think of which administration was in the White House at the time, it was in the second administration of Bush II presidency. And so President Bush II had a vested interest in achieving quite a strong resolution. But the way that the United Nations Security Council works is that there's 15 members, 10 on rotation, 5 permanent members that all have the veto powers. And so even if President Bush's administration wanted a very strong resolution, there are a couple of countries, unfortunately, that had a bit of form in making sure that if it doesn't involve Jews, it doesn't hit the news, benefits them. And so while all eyes are on the South Litani River sector, or indeed Gaza, people aren't talking about what is happening in the east of Ukraine, or what's happening in the South China Sea, or with the Uyghurs. We understand that about 1 million Uyghurs are in camps in China. And so that sort of explains the fact that the resolution that the parties were comfortable to sign in effect had some structural imperfections. And when I, as an apolitical Arms Corps officer that was seconded to the UN, actually got about the South Litani River sector and saw Hezbollah flags, which are referred by some as the yellow flags of the resistance, 600 metres away from a division-sized headquarters in southern Lebanon that was armed, where I and my team members were unarmed. I had to ask, WTF? Aren't we mandated to keep these non-state actors out of the area to preserve the terms of the ceasefire agreement? And it was a Chapter 6 mandate where UNIFIL were not permitted to enter onto private property. And the simple answer is that the resolution that was signed into effect didn't allow the observers to do what would constitute, applying lethal force to keep the non-state actors out of that sector. So what? I understand recently the parties have made the decision not to renew the UNIFIL mandate. That is consistent with what I believe is the correct course of action. Our countries are in a parlous situation economically where we can't afford to throw good money after bad. I believe that deterrence is achieved more simply with Israel's incredible intelligence in the event that that some of the non-state actors look at reoccupying a particular sector. There's lethal force applied in order to achieve separation. Over.
Thank you. Shane, would you like to unmute?
Michael, what is your response to Australians who say they don't care about what's happening in the Middle East because it doesn't really affect us?
Look, cracking question, Shane. I personally refer to myself as a father and as a humanist. I see with a level of precision, not only as a veteran, but someone has taken my responsibilities of command in war of people like your children incredibly seriously, where I've read everything from Noam Chomsky and Gore Vidal through to Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and a lot of things in between. I was genuinely surprised with how many people couldn't empathise and relate to what was attacking Israel and the Jewish diaspora in places like Australia and further afield was a threat to our shared values. And so my book, A Light Still Burns, is a way of explaining a number of things in some historically grounded but simple language that we can then take and gradually influence a conversation at a time. I'm already working to influence all those people that I come into contact with, but of course the most efficient and effective way that I can move forward is as the conductor of the orchestra, help other people to understand and build tools that they in turn can ripple out by influencing their friends. And Shane, I wouldn't hope to think that I could influence your friends better than you personally could, but the best way that we've ever discovered to halve a problem is to share a problem, and what success looks like. And I've done this quite a few times in terms of the preparation, is that people have referred me to people such as, I've got dear friends in the Labor Party that are Zionists, Jewish. They've referred me to some of their friends non-Jewish in the Labor Party. Part of my strategic approach here from a completely apolitical perspective is the vision of growing tomorrow's Bob Hawkes, Julia Gillard or HV Doc Evatt, as well as growing tomorrow's Douglas Murrays, Erin Molan, Nova Peris, Gemma Tognini, looking at various sectors and building those influences that see, my goodness, I get it now from my time spent in Israel. I see the truth, I see the stakes, and I'm looking at appealing to pathos in terms of the four Greek or rhetorical appeals. I believe that B.A. Santamaria is right, that we should always bet on self-interest. It's the only horse always pulling in every race. I was genuinely surprised at how few otherwise reasonable, open-minded and educated non-Jews in Australia and across the world can't see what happened in Israel in October 7 along similar lines to what happened in Bali with the bombing or 9/11 back in 2001. And to me, that's part of my vision on a better tomorrow. Over.
An, would you like to unmute, please?
Hello, Michael. So I have two quick questions. First of all, one, would you be interested in speaking at the Australian Against Anti-Semitism on October the 26th? And two, as part as Trump's 20-step, Hamas had to surrender their weapons. I agree to that, but what if, this is the question, because I've seen Hamas execute Palestinians, what if they refuse to give up their guns? Because
Looks like someone's muted you on halfway through the question, but I am speaking at the October 26 event. I'm speaking down in Melbourne because I'm down there for an unrelated measure, and indeed Mark Leach and Never Again is now. They're dear friends. I'm genuine in my interest and desire to partner and collaborate with other people working in this space, and indeed I've met Rob and David and Ali and other members, Tamir of the AJA, and indeed a lot of the other organisations. Outside of that, President Trump is the ultimate deal maker. He's extending some rope to some really unsavoury actors such as Hamas. He's allowed them to be whacked. He's given them a chance to come to a peaceful agreement, but I think he's very clear-eyed on the fact that while you can lead a horse to water, and President Trump's approach is often getting the horse's head and sticking it in the stream, he can't make it drink. And in the event that Hamas does not in practice demonstrate their adherence to the terms of the ceasefire agreement, I think all of us know the probable consequence. Over.
Thank you, Michael. Jason, would you like to unmute, please?
Yeah, good evening, sir. Like you, I'm a veteran. I did 30 years in the Army.
Thank you for your service.
And Belize. My question for you, and you may not be able to answer this yet because you're still in, but do you think there might be a potential role for the ADF in a putative international peacekeeping force in Gaza?
Question completely for government.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
thank you for your service, Jason.
Thank you. We'll go to Jeff if you'd like to unmute, please.
Shalom. I have an idea that there should be a sense of shame from leading prime ministers of Western countries like the Canadian one, who shamelessly said that he would willingly arrest Netanyahu if he ventured into his land of Canada. I would suggest that it's possible that Albanese would do the same. Never mind the fact of a sense of shame or lack of a sense of shame of these professional Jew haters in all realms. But haven't they got a sense of history? Do they not have a sense of an idea that history will be unkind to them when it will obviously is well known by just about everybody that what happened in October, as you said about 10 minutes ago, and all the way through your talk, haven't they got a sense of shame that history will forever blacken their name for what they say and what they do and what they claim that they will intend to do if Netanyahu steps foot into their land? Over.
Yeah, it's a good question, well asked. I think from a broad perspective, in democracies, people get the government we deserve. Not talking about our elected officials, because they're not the people that I'm looking at influencing. Indeed, it would be imprudent for me. But I think that those that are reasonable, open-minded, Douglas Murray refers to some love us, a number hate us, and it's a frighteningly large number. But most in the middle would prefer just to watch the football. They're some of the people that I'm looking at influencing. But if we take if we take an approach to try and understand and meet people with where they are, I'm not talking about the activists. I'm not talking about the anarchists or the obvious anti-Semites or those people ideologically that may have been aligned to the PLO for many, many decades. They're not my target audience, but reasonable people that may dial into the ABC. If we didn't know what we knew, if we zetted our understanding with Israel and we thought, okay, how would I feel if I took my news off the ABC? Perhaps the very best, Jeff, we could come to is, well, that's pretty unambiguous, but let me just get a second opinion first. Let me check with the UN or a third opinion, Amnesty International or maybe the ICRC. One of the challenges that we're facing, and I heard the word this morning, that there's been a long march through our institutions. And so our institutions are structurally sound. They've just been overtaken by activists and special interest groups and radicals. In my view, it's better to have a United Nations where there's an ability to discuss, even if it amounts to nothing other than opining and arguments that not. But at the moment, I think that certainly I believe that the UN is not currently fit for purpose. And in my book, I talk about what I believe ought to occur, which is funds frozen, some performance measures established, and then a review function. And if there's not a review, well, maybe the United Nations goes the way of the League of Nations before. Schumpeter has an interesting economic theory, creative destruction. If institutions aren't fit for purpose, like USAID is a case in point under the current administration, if they can't be healed, then maybe they need to be closed or reallocated. And there's some precedent in the Australian political construct for that creative destruction playing out as well. Over.
Thank you, Michael. Ida, would you like to unmute, please?
Congratulations on your selfless work, Michael. Regarding Iran, what do you think of the possibility that Iran could buy and utilize a nuclear warhead on one of their many ballistic missiles?
Yeah, that's a cracking question, and that's something that occupies not only our minds but the government and security agencies in the Jewish state. Tragically, Iran has been very consistent in their rhetoric since 1979. Death to the little Satan as well as death to the big Satan. And I'm not sure who it was, but someone that refers to the fact that when you've got genocidal maniacs that say they want to eviscerate you, we ought to believe them. It might have been a Douglas Murray quote. And so in my view, there will be subsequent actions against the Ayatollahs of Iran. But again, I believe President Trump handled himself quite extraordinarily, where that 12-day action back in June was brought to a series of decisive effects very quickly, in a manner where President Trump and the Secretary of State and the Secretary of War could fly to Europe and say, right, NATO countries, 5% of defence. What we've got is a number of challenges, and indeed one of my particular concerns at that time is that if the US had lent metaphorically in too close to Iran and become decisively engaged, one of the second-order effects may have been punched in the back of the head by a larger threat. And indeed, I won't go into the detail here and now. It's one of the chapters in my book I refer to as the sum of all fears. In my judgment, we are at the moment 2.5 of 4 preconditions that historians in 100 years may refer to as the causal factors of the Third World War, the War of Civilization, Russia against NATO in Eastern Europe, Iran and other terror states and proxies, not only against Israel, but US interests in the Middle East, the damage that Western countries have done with our economic policy, our education policy, our energy policy. There's a fourth unrealised precondition that I won't go into now, but one thing I've tried to do is frame some of the geostrategic and global context to help us understand some factors that I've had to watch and across a professional military career of 30 years. Thank you, Ida.
Thank you, Michael. Kathy, would you like to unmute, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael, for your presentation. I'm very impressed with the 2023 Foundation vision and goals. I went to Israel very early in my career because I was moving on to work in the Middle East, and I knew I needed to have a perspective on Israel because where I was going, people were very anti. And it really, really helped set my path. And how can we let other young professionals in their 20s in a concise way know about the opportunities afforded through Foundation 2023?
Yeah, I think engagements like this, and look, I will say, do please buy my book, do please buy it and pass it around. I will flag that, I joined the army at 17. You don't stay in for 31 years if you're motivated by money. I'm not saying that to try and get sales because there's any stipend coming back for me. I'm genuine in my concern that the challenges that we're seeing at the moment pose unacceptable safety risks to the interests of my unborn grandchildren, and I'm going to exercise my agency to explain my concerns to people to help them empathise and relate. I've identified a series of inaugural recipients to pilot the activities, broadly economic or vocational opportunities from July next year. I'm not looking at rushing to failure. Indeed, some of the people that I'm encouraging across are more particular not before August next year when the academic year in Israel starts. First vocational placements in July next year, and the inaugural, the kick-off activity with the veterans group concurrent with Anzac Day in April 2025. There's more that I work with through donors and potential recipients, but I think that I'm looking at building a strategic pipeline that will still be around 100 years from now. And Rob Gregory, I don't know what your great-grandkids will be blamed for in 100 years, but if we look backwards in the last couple of thousand years of recorded history, Jewish communities have always been vilified for something or another. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred, and it's a shapeshifter. And so I'm looking at building that coherent strategic pipeline that will endure, like Fulbright, which is going strong after 80 years. Over.
Thank you, Michael. We'll take our two final questions. Ashley, please unmute.
Thank you for your service, Michael, and to those that have served. And I just wanted to ask Natasha Horstov very early on, as mentioned, there's never been such a moral inversion of what we've witnessed recently. Has anything ever come close historically, militarily or otherwise, of what we've seen? I just cannot fathom as a father and from the heart and from within this moral inversion that we're seeing. It's just breathtaking to me. Well, heartbreaking, actually, to be honest. So heart goes out to all, particularly the women and the children and the families of the kibbutz and all the areas that have been under attack and suffered immensely.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I think it's without doubt the worst case of victim blaming that I think we've ever known as a species. Natasha Hausdorff is a dear friend and a fierce lioness. Thank goodness that she's on our side. The way that she can craft an argument is second to none. I think the only thing that comes close, Ashley, is what George Orwell wrote in his fiction 1984, and indeed a dear friend of mine, friend from Sydney, Laura Tates, when I wrote an article, Gaslighting and Projection of Orwellian Proportion, earlier this year, which is one of the chapters in my book. I think that the only thing that George Orwell got right is he mistitled his seminal work. 1984 should have been titled 2024. Orwell was simply 40 years too early. But yeah, that's part of the difficult reality that we're operating in, and I didn't see this coming. I took a deep breath after October 2023, and I started to think through and design something that would be strategic and significant. My first attempts on social media with people I went to Brisbane Grammar School with 30 years ago were failures. People that I've known the whole of my adult life are otherwise sensible, educated, that would talk river to the sea and, hey mate, I've lived in Israel when I worked with the UN. That's not what's going on. Can we have a chat about it? Just get it shouted at and cancelled. And so if people are deeply dispirited from those we thought were friends that not only went silent but actually started attacking us, I've felt that as well. So yeah, we just need to pick ourselves up and move incrementally forward. Exercise our agency and looking at influencing those reasonable and open-minded people, one or two at a time, and try to just put out of our mind the haters. They aren't going anywhere. They'll still be around next year, but we concentrate on those that we can positively influence in the short term. Over.
And finally, Hugh Kitson, please unmute.
Hello, Michael. It was good to meet you a couple of months ago. Just a very quick question. Do you think the involvement of Qatar and Turkey with this international stabilization force that President Trump is putting in place, do you think their involvement, Qatar and Turkey, is going to actually undermine the whole process?
Hugh, it's great to see you online, mate. It was my honour to get to meet you a couple of months ago. I love your work, Whose Land. Thank you so much for what you've done across a professional lifetime and what you're still involved with. Yeah, look, that's a really good question, well asked. I've given my thoughts in the book as to Turkey under Erdogan and Qatar and what it means. I think the easiest explanation is trust but supervise. Again, President Trump has brought some parties into this discussion where he has leverage, and it may simply be that, hey, Qatar, we've caught you with your fingers in the cookie jar. We know the amount of money that you're dumping into schools and other institutions for nefarious purposes. You're being watched like a hawk. This is the path that we'd like to see you tread so that you're part of the solution, not part of the problem. And indeed, if certain indicators and warnings are triggered, then President Trump and this administration has demonstrated a willingness to act on their agency. I think it's really heartbreaking up in Turkey. I've read a couple of biographies on Mango and the work of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. For those that haven't taken time to, when attending the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, do please go across the road to the Anzac Parade and read the words of Ataturk. I find incredibly moving, and what Erdogan is establishing at the moment is quite dispiriting to a strategically significant and formally secular nation, and it's been a really difficult 15 years. I think you're open-eyed, Hugh, to some of the realities, and as I saw in our private discussion, you've got an amazing graft on the nuances and the geopolitics. We are living, ladies and gentlemen, in a period of historical significance. Back to you, Tennille.
Thank you, Michael. With that, we will wrap up. But before we go to our final comments, I just want to mention that it is our Charity Day coming up. That is on November 30th, Sunday, November 30th. And that is the one chance that AJ Sadaka, across the year to raise these vital needed funds that we need to continue to operate and fight anti-Semitism. So I'm putting the call out. If you are available to volunteer on Sunday, the 30th of November, anywhere in Australia, please do let us know across our email or social media. If you are looking to be a matcher and donate to this year's charity campaign, please do get in contact with us as well. That's office@jewishassociation.org.au. Michael, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Your book is available right now on Amazon. I have put a link in the chat. Look, the easiest way to find Michael, if you didn't get the links in the chat, or if you don't have time on the recording to go back to the QR code, you can Google Michael Scott CSC. It's the first link that comes up on his amazon.com.au. Please support Michael. Please purchase this book. He is everything that we strive to do, fighting anti-Semitism, a better future for Jews in Australia, around the world, and fighting for truth and justice. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you have any final comments, please let us know.
Team, it's time. It's time for our light to shine. If not us, who? If not now, when? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you all next week, Wednesday, where we'll have another wonderful session with AJ. Thank you again, Michael Scott.
Thanks, Danielle. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.